work less and enhance your client results, an introduction to constitutional iridology. I really appreciate making the time to be here today. Want to remind you to take just a moment to grab a pen and paper, to take notes, and to do whatever you need to do to help information sink really deeply for yourself and minimize distractions as much as you can. Right? You've dedicated this time and you want to make the most of it. So I want to know, first off, do you have any background in iridology? And if you do, who was your teacher, or do you know what style it was? That'll help me to shape the information today. It'll tell me how deep I can go and how broad I can go. So do you have any background in iridology? Oh, and Jenny's already a constitutional. Nice. Well done, Jenny. Debbie, any background? Yeah, teacher was Rob T. Okay, and he did constitution. Okay, I know Rob. All right. Well, let's see where this takes us today then. Why did you prioritize your time to be here today? Debbie wanted a bit of a refresh. Right on. We'll touch a little bit on refresh. Okay, fair enough. And Jenny wants a refresh too. All righty. So since you're all wanting a refresh, let's just kind of go through this list. This obviously isn't you. You don't know much about iridology. You want to know more. You already know stuff about iridology. You've dabbled in iridology and you're ready to take a deep dive. Sounds like you already have. You're looking for an iridology course and you want to vet the instructor. Maybe. You want faster, clearer insights into your client's health concerns and predispositions. Debbie's giving me a nod yes. You want to help your clients get better results with you spending less time doing the work. You want to stand out professionally. You want to ensure the programs you recommend are individualized and you want to avoid using cookie cutter programs. Yeah, Debbie's on board with that one too. And you want to be more or even more confident in the recommendations you're making. Do some of those sound like they fit for where you are and where you want to go? Yeah, fantastic. So today I'm going to share with you lots of information, and you both have backgrounds, so it's going to be a high-level overview. I will also let you know that at the end of the program today, I'm going to share with you information about the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System for Health Professionals course. And I want you to know that there's no pressure. There's not going to be you have to, enroll by tomorrow at noon. Nothing like that. I don't do high pressure things at all. So it's really going to be that I will invite you to connect with me again if you are interested. So today we are going to discuss iridology, and we are specifically going to discuss what iridology is and how it works in a clinical setting. Are you both using iridology in a clinical setting already? No? Okay. And we're going to talk about who benefits from you adding iridology to your skill set. We'll talk about the limitations of iridology. We're going to talk about how iridology helps you stand out among your peers. So if you're thinking of questions that you want to raise with me, I'd like you to be writing them down. We're going to talk about how to become the go-to practitioner in your field. We're going to talk about the details of the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course. And there will be an invitation, like I said earlier, for you to connect with me to talk about your goals and the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course. That's a long title. And we will do some client case studies. So you'll be able to compare what you see with what I do with what you already know, right? So you already know some of this. Constitutional iridology is about understanding the constitution of the person. And it's about how he or she is put together. Specifically, where are the inherited strengths and where are the inherited weaknesses? And how do those work either for each other or against each other? So this is about understanding that blueprint so that we can tailor the questions we're going to ask our client. And from there, more specifically, tailor the recommendations that we want to make for our client. And we want to make those recommendations with precision and with compassion, because we need to know what our clients' limitations are as well. What are they capable of doing? If we don't know that, we're going to be in deep trouble. As you already know, because you've had some training, the constitution is determined by assessing the colors, the fiber lay, and the patterns in the iris and what they mean when it comes to the way the body is predisposed to work. This is the inherited blueprint. This is the epigenetics of the person. The more we learn about constitutional iridology, the more we realize we are looking at epigenetic patterns. Not absolute guarantees, but epigenetic patterns. So knowing how to assess this means that you can trace the issues back to their roots, and then again, tailor your questions and tailor your recommendations to be the most effective they can be for your client at that point in time. So is that something that you've learned already, how to use the iridology and the questions to get back to the root of the problem? You've done a little bit of that? Okay. We do a lot of that in dynamic iridology. We really practice the art of connecting symptoms to iris markers to questions to get the answers that we need to create the programs. So this is what happens, and you might have seen this, or maybe you're afraid this will happen, but this is what happens sometimes when we don't do constitutional iridology. I'm going to be very judgmental here when we don't do it the right way. We end up creating these long lists of recommendations, and you've seen these lists. If you've looked at any of the Instagram and Facebook posts about iridology, especially on Facebook where someone puts up their eyes and says, "Tell me what's wrong," and other people are weighing in and giving long lists of everything that's wrong, and really they're diagnosing, and then they give long lists of what to do about it. And these are not uncommon things that you're seeing here. These are things that we would recommend to a lot of people. Eat more leafy greens, increase your protein intake, drink more water, cut out the coffee, cut out fizzy beverages, get more sleep, reduce your stress, eat 3 meals every day. No junk food or fast food, reduce your stress. Oh, that's an important one. It's on there twice. 30 minutes of daily physical activity. That's a lot. And if you give that to your client in one sitting, what will their reaction be? What do you think they're going to do with that? Again, if we ask for lab tests, the client has to go book the appointment with the doctor. I don't know how long it takes in your place, in your city, to get an appointment with a doctor, but here you can wait 2 or 3 weeks, right? And then by the time they get an appointment with the lab, it can be another couple of weeks. And by the time we get the results back, another week. So we're looking at 4 to 6 weeks often before we even get the lab results back. And by then, we've got such a huge delay that it makes it really difficult for the client to actually still be engaged and excited about moving forward with their health. Now, that all leads to this huge idea of disconnect that, oftentimes when we've got all these delays and we're overwhelming, we know there's something deeper going on, but we can't find it because we're so tangled up in all the little details and all the waiting and everything. And if we don't have the data to confirm what we suspect, we often don't want to move forward. We want to hold back until we know what's going on. And so with that creates even more delays. Now, the trick here is it's not really your fault. I don't know what your schooling was like, but my nutrition schooling, my herbal schooling especially, taught me to ask for lab tests, to wait for lab results, to invest all this time outside the appointment. And that meant that the tools that I had were actually very time bound. They couldn't give me immediate practical results. And that is a beautiful thing about iridology, because iridology gives us those immediate and practical results. Modern iridology, of course, examines the iris of the eye for the base color, for the fiber layout, and for the color variations in the iris. And you already know that. The iris, as you know, is genetically determined, and the colors in the iris do not equal toxicity. They didn't get into the eye because of toxic exposure. Pigments are not earned, and they cannot be erased by cleansing. Actually, they can't be removed through a deliberate action on our part, period. We know that up-to-date Iridologists also incorporate sclerology. There are entire courses on sclerology. The dynamic iridology assessment system includes some sclerology, but certainly not the deep dive that a full sclerology course is. So why should we use iridology? Well, it does help us to separate the inherent tendencies from imbalances that are caused by human error. Not every problem that we see has a genetic root, right? Some of the problems we see are because the person is eating incorrect foods for their body type, or they're not getting enough sleep, or they've got too much stress. And those things may not have anything to do really with the genes. We want to use iridology to stimulate that client-directed conversation to understand the client needs, their goals, their symptoms, and the root causes more completely and quickly. Now, that's really important because it's been said, for example, that doctors know within just a minute of coming into the exam room what they're going to prescribe. They often, if the notes say that this client is coming in for a fever and a sore throat, the doctor already knows what they're going to do about it, even though they haven't run any tests. And there's a lot of reasons for a sore throat, for instance, right? So maybe diagnosing without assessing is not such a great idea. So we want to understand our clients, not so that we can diagnose, because we don't do that, but so that we can understand what the problems really are. When we use iridology, it helps us to understand the best way to support the body using knowledge and skills that you've already have in herbology, nutrition, essential oils, lifestyle, body energy, emotions. So important. And when I teach iridology, I teach my students to integrate the skills they already have. So as we do practices together and we're looking at an eye and I'm asking questions about what questions would you ask? Here's the case history. What questions would you ask? What would you recommend? I always want the student I'm speaking with to give me answers from their background. So if they've got a herbal background, I want to know what would they recommend for herbs. If they've got a nutrition background, I want to know what would they recommend for nutrition. If they've got an aromatherapy background, what essential oils would they recommend? I want them to integrate the knowledge they have with iridology. We also want to use iridology because it gives us insight as to some of the foods and supplements that may be the most helpful and those that might be harmful, because not every supplement that's out there is good for every person. And we need to know which ones we should be using. It also shows us the inherent strengths and challenges of the organs, glands, and tissues. That's a really good set of information to have. And it shows us what tendencies have been passed down through the previous 3 to 4 generations, because what we see in the eyes is typically that old. It's coming down through the generations. That's what genetics is, right? I read an interesting book that was about Potager's cats and the research that was done that showed that the child's genes and health are more closely related to the grandmother than they are to the mother. Very, very interesting because of the way genetics works. And so we want to keep that in mind, that we are looking not just at our client, but we're looking at things that have been passed down through the generations. And we know that iridology can also teach us about the inherent and dynamic balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. It shows us the potential insufficiencies of every body system. And it shows us the inherent tendencies to systemic elevated uric acid and cholesterol, just to name a few of the things that we see very clearly in an eye. But what can it not do? Because iridology has limitations, right? It absolutely does. Iridology cannot name current or past pathologies. That would be diagnosing. It doesn't give us disease names. Sometimes you'll see markings that correlate with where a person's had a broken bone or a surgery, but the markings in the eyes are not because of the surgery. They're not because of the broken bones. Those markings are showing us where there were tendencies to weakness that expose that part of the body to a greater risk of injury and damage. Okay. And I could show you case studies if we had time today of before and afters from before a bone was broken and literally a week after the bone was broken or a few days after the bone was broken and no change in the eye whatsoever. In spite of the fact that it was surgery required to heal the broken bone, did not show any difference in the iris. We also cannot use iridology to determine blood pressure or cholesterol readings, but we can see different kinds of markings in the eyes that when we triangulate them, we can understand then why the person has high blood pressure or why they've got elevated cholesterol. And there is one marking that does show an increased risk of inherent of cholesterol issues in a very dynamic way. We know that iridology cannot show us if arteries are blocked or if they're hardened, and we can't diagnose hemorrhage, stroke, or heart attack from the irides, but there are indicators in the pupils that can suggest that we may have some of those challenges and that they may be imminent or happening right now. Iridology cannot detect pregnancy, abortion, or miscarriage. It cannot distinguish between age, gender, or predict the lifespan or impending time of death. And it cannot diagnose the presence of a tumor, kidney stones, or gallstones. And that's really important that we remember that we cannot diagnose from the eyes. We may see a tendency towards a weakness in an organ or in body tissue, and a tumor may develop there, but that weakness that we're seeing, that predisposition to weakness, could manifest in many different ways, not only as a tumor, for instance. Iridology is not new, and neither is it fully developed. What we knew 40 years ago is very different from what we know now. Iridology has changed so much, and that has led to problems because there are many teachers who are holding on to the old beliefs that have been disproved, and they're still teaching those old beliefs, and it is creating a real challenge when we talk about the new research and the new things that we know that have been proven, because some people don't like to change their minds, right? I don't know if you know anybody like that with regard to any direction. Some people don't want to change, right? But constitutional iridology has come a long way. And I know because I was a Jensenian iridologist 45 years ago. I have done that complete switch, completely over to constitutional. Constitutional is a lovely assessment tool. Here's what one of my students said about her journey as an iridologist. She is a naturopath. Her name is Sharon Bimrose. She is in Australia. She came to me as a licensed naturopath. She'd already learned iridology in her ND schooling, and mostly what she learned was markings. Just these are what the markings are. They didn't teach her how to integrate it. They didn't teach her what they meant. It was just one marking means one thing. And so that added hours of work. For every client she saw, she would take their photos, get their history, then go off and create a protocol, do the assessment of the eyes and create a protocol, and would usually email the results back. And I know how much she was charging. She wasn't charging enough to cover the extra hours that she was doing the reports, right? She really wasn't. And so she was a little frustrated with it. So when she came into my course, she said this: as a naturopath and herbalist, I've always used iridology in my practice. However, it was learning how to connect the iris findings in this course, which was dynamic iridology, that has made the biggest difference. This alone has eliminated the unpaid hours I used to spend prioritizing a treatment plan. It really doesn't do a lot of good to know what the markings are if you don't know how to use them, right? So it's my opinion that a tool is only a tool if it actually is of benefit. If you've had training and it's training that you can't integrate into what you're doing for whatever reason, then it's not a tool. Do you agree with me on that one? It was just a course you took that cost you time, cost you money, but it's not a tool because it's not working for you. That makes sense? Yeah. Have you ever taken a course that you thought was really going to be really great, and maybe it was great information, but you were left not knowing how to implement it? Yeah, that doesn't feel good, does it? You really want to, I think we all want to make sure that the time and the money we spend in a course is going to be useful for us and for our clients. Really, really important. So here's some questions to consider. Normally these would come up one at a time, but because of our technology issues today, you get to see them all at once. I want you to think about, if you are seeing clients, ask yourself these questions in that context of your current appointments. If you're not seeing clients, I want you to ask yourself these questions in the context of how you would like your appointments to run. Okay, so you might want to write the answers down here. How long are your appointments? And how many follow-up appointments do your clients come back for? Think that through for just a moment. How long do you want your appointments to be if you're not seeing clients yet? And how many times do you want them to come back? Having repeat clients who keep coming back, maybe it's every month for a few months and then it's twice a year after that, is one of the most amazing ways to create a stable income in your health coaching business. If you are doing appointments, or if you want to do appointments that are one-offs, they come and they see you once and you spend hours with them and you write a big fancy report and you send them away, you will likely only have a very unstable income with that. Because if you can set things up, and this is one of the things I teach in dynamic iridology, about how to structure the programs and the recommendations you make so that your clients can be successful from one appointment to the next, and they want to come back and tell you about their success so you can build on that success, that does a few things. It lets you nurture your clients to help them reach their health goals. And again, it gives you stability of income. Because as a practitioner, if you don't have stability of income, it's really hard to do your work. Right? If you're wondering how you're going to pay your next bills, that's a big problem. A big problem. Are you able to stay on time at least 90% of the time? It's not unusual for practitioners to go over by a bit. But if you can stay on time most of the time, that's a really good thing. It shows that you respect your own time, and it helps your clients to learn to respect your time as well. And that is a really valuable skill. Now, I used to go over time by like an hour on every appointment. And it's like, I should just say my appointments are 2 hours long instead of 1 hour, because I kept going over. Number 3, how do you conduct your intake? Do you use a questionnaire or conversation? If you use a questionnaire, how long is it? I spoke with one nutritionist whose questionnaire was 20 pages long. I simply wouldn't fill it out. I wouldn't. I get grumpy filling out 2 pages of questionnaire when I go to the chiropractor's office, right? Talk to me. Have a conversation with me. Here are the words I choose. Here are my inflections. That's going to give you more information than a badly scribbled one-word answer on a piece of paper ever will. And it's going to help the client feel heard, right? They're going to feel important and like this matters. Question number 4, how long does it take you to create a program for a client? Now, this one was excessive. I spoke with another nutritionist, a trained nutritionist, and she said it takes her 40 hours to create a program for a client. And I thought, okay, 40 hours, that's a full work week. How much do you charge? And can anyone afford to do that for their whole family? And will they ever need to come back? In my opinion, they would need to come back, because even when we make positive changes, the body shifts and the recommendations need to shift to keep pace, right? And so it just didn't seem like that was reasonable. And I'm going to suggest to you that even if you're spending 2 hours of your own time creating each program, so you see your client maybe for 1 hour, 2 hours to make the program, that's 3 hours. Are you getting paid for all 3? Or are you getting paid for the 1 hour you're with your client? And probably one of the most important questions, how satisfied are you with the process? Do you feel like it needs to be tweaked? If you're feeling anxious and unhappy and unsettled with the way things are going, then something needs to change. I learned a long time ago when I used to let my appointments run over by an hour, a couple of things. Number one, my clients didn't value the extra time. I was probably cutting into their day in a way that was making the rest of their day difficult because they hadn't planned on that extra hour. I wasn't getting paid for the extra hour. I thought I was giving good value, but I realized in retrospect I was not. And it meant that clients weren't following through. I was spending too much time giving too much information and they were not following through. They were leaving overwhelmed, deer in the headlights, right? And so you want to make sure that you avoid that. And Iridology can help you when you do constitutional. Those 2-hour appointments were when I was doing Jensen Iridology, because Jensen taught us to list every marking and every possible problem and every possible remedy. But that's not what we do with constitutional. This is not what I do with constitutional because it doesn't work in a clinical setting. So, I would give my clients these long lists and they would, in the office, they would sometimes put on that brave face and say, yeah, I can do this. And when I would send them an email to check on them 2 weeks later, they would ghost me. And then they would cancel their follow-up appointment because they hadn't followed through. They didn't want to come back and say they'd failed. They felt like they wasted their money the first time because they got a program that they couldn't do, right? And so really important that we keep that in mind and that we keep our programs really simple, because it can be anything. I had one client where I could see she was starting to get that panicky look on her face as we were having the conversation. And as I'm making notes in my files about what I wanted to do, and I suggested to her, let's just start really simple. Let's take you from drinking no water every day to drinking 4 glasses of water a day. And I don't want you doing that by tomorrow. I'd like, if you can do 1 glass of water a day for the next week and 2 glasses a day for the week after that and 3 the next week and 4 the final week before you come back to see me, that will be perfect. That'll be so good. At the 2-week mark, she emailed me. She said, I can't do this. I can't even drink 2 glasses of water a day. Right? So we had to get even more simple with her. And because she was so easily overwhelmed with what I perceived as simple changes, but they were big changes for her, she did drop off. Right? And so, we want to make sure that we are not frustrating our clients. Let's flip that whole thing on its head. With constitutional iridology, you can see your client's inherent tendencies. You can see their epigenetic strengths and weaknesses and stress points and their current hotspots, right? Because those current hotspots, you're going to triangulate those by putting symptoms against markers. It's not that the markers are going to change at all, but the markers are going to help you understand why the hotspots are there in their symptoms. And you can do all that even before you look at a lab test or even before you ask for a lab test. Iridology can help you to basically triage your clients quickly in every appointment to know what your next questions and your next steps should be. Ultimately, that's going to make you very unique. It's going to help you stand out amongst your peers, regardless of whether you're an RN, an ND, a herbalist, a nutritionist, whatever your training, it's going to help you. And it's going to help you see what no one else can see. It's going to help you see what the other practitioners can't see because they're not using iridology. What I want for you is success, not just for you, but for your clients as well. Because when your clients are successful with you using iridology with them, you will be successful. And that's what we want to have happen. Success means helping your clients get results in baby steps. I often term it as I want my clients to be a massive success in baby steps rather than a huge failure in one step. I want them to see progress every time they come to see me. I want them to have homework that they can implement and that they can actually see results for themselves. They can feel the results. That is what is going to inspire them to continue on to keep following your instructions and to trust you that you know what you're doing. When you're doing that confidently, you're going to stand out. You're going to be the one that they want to come back to. How many other practitioners do you know who are practicing and actually using iridology? Naturopaths, functional nutrition people, registered nurses. How many do you know that you know? Two. Yeah, two, Debbie says. Count them, two. 1, 2. That's not very many. That's not very many when you look at all of the nutritionists, all the herbalists, all the holistic health coaches out there that have training. That's not a lot of competition for you, Debbie. Not much at all. There is room for you in this. Oftentimes, the nutritionists and herbalists and people like that will be using other forms of testing. They'll be doing the hair mineral testing or saliva testing or poop tests or you name it, all kinds of testing. And that is great. And those tests also correlate beautifully with iridology. And so if you like those kinds of tests, I'm not saying stop doing them. I'm saying let iridology help you decide which tests to ask for, because those tests are expensive to run. I know the gut biome test that I like to use, my cost on it is $399, and I charge my clients $499 because of the time it takes me to evaluate the test when I get the results back, right? Not everybody has that kind of cash to spend on extra tests. And I want to start protocols right away with my client. I want to be making recommendations in that very first appointment. If I have to wait 4 weeks for a poop test to come back, we're wasting time. But I can get them started because I've got the iridology, and the iridology can continue to grow with us through our relationship with that client. So important, so important. All right. We've introduced you to iridology, and both of you already kind of knew iridology already. But if you're new to me, let me introduce myself. I'm Judith Cobb. I have been a holistic practitioner since 1980. That gets up into higher math. And I started out as a Jensenian iridologist. For the first about 5 or 6 years, I was doing Jensen and herbology and nutrition all rolled in together and taking all kinds of extra time in every appointment and getting some results, but not the results I was promised we would see. I was promised my clients' eyes would change when we put them on the right programs. And my clients' eyes didn't change, but they were feeling better. And I began to wonder what the heck is going on here. Back then, I had a 4-page intake questionnaire. And again, most of the time I couldn't read the writing, right? People don't like filling out paperwork. It's just a truth, unless you know you have that kind of a bend where you really like filling forms out. Not many people do. And so I kept trying to make the most of that form. I put in different questions, took out questions, shortened it, made it longer, played with it for a couple of years, and finally decided this wasn't working. And then I had the opportunity to learn constitutional iridology, to study with Bill Caradonna, who is one of the original people who brought constitutional into North America. And that was the turning point. It made so much sense. Rather than looking for one marking and assigning it one meeting, now we were looking at the symptoms and looking at a group of markings to understand how the organs work together to create that symptom. And that would then help us understand how to reverse engineer this to get to the root of the problem to create real results. And that was ever so exciting, ever so exciting. Over the years, I have taken so many courses. And every time I took a course, it would make my appointments longer because I felt like I had to use that information with every client. Probably didn't need to do that. And it wasn't until I learned constitutional iridology that I was able to start sorting and sifting which tools to use with which client and when, right? And so back in the early days, there we go, that's a bit bigger. Back in the early days, what is now known as the International Iridology Practitioners Association was called the National Iridology Research Association. You know, when I would overload my clients with so much information in the early days, often they would only come back for the second appointment. So 1, 2, and done. The big question then is, if constitutional iridology can help you to streamline your work with clients, help you to create your programs more quickly, like when you're sitting with them in your, say, 75-minute or maybe 90-minute appointment, what about your clients? What do they think? And I wish the technology was working properly, because I've got several testimonials here from clients, most of them posted on Google, talking about how the work I did with them was so helpful. And while none of them specifically mention iridology, iridology is a part of every appointment. What these people are talking about in their testimonials is about the results we got. And they were results that I couldn't have gotten if I didn't have iridology. But what about practitioners? This is just a handful of the certified iridologists that I have had the pleasure of bringing up in the industry. And, the truth is, again, as we mentioned earlier, that constitutional iridology is a very narrow niche. There's not a lot of people doing it. And so these are, out of the hundreds of practitioners I've trained, here's 6 of the most recent ones. And you'll notice we've got a registered dental hygienist, a bioregional herbalist, we've got a registered holistic nutritionist, we've got a medical doctor, we've got an ND, and we've got lovely Kimberly, and she's got so many credentials behind her name that I can't even list them all. So there is benefit for everyone who is holistic to learn constitutional iridology and to use it in their clinic. Let's talk a little bit about the course. How are you doing? Good. Thank you. I appreciate the thumbs up. So the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course consists of all of what IPA, the International Iridology Practitioners Association, calls the core curriculum. So this is what they would call level 1 and level 2. They require people to have level 1 and level 2 in order to sit for the certification exam. So I chose to not offer it as 2 separate courses, but to intermingle them, because there's some overlap that needs to be treated as overlap in the curriculum. So IPA has also said that the course needs to be 35 hours long, between the level 1 and level 2, 35 hours in total. The Dynamic Iridology course typically runs 45 to 50 hours, because we take time to practice together in every class session. We have live group mentoring twice each month via a live stream, but that's a place where you can bring cases you're working on, questions about the curriculum. If there's something that you didn't ask in class and you want it answered now, it can be answered in these office hour sessions. If you've got a question about business building, we answered those in this. If you've got a question about iridology cameras or getting iPhotos, we can talk about that in office hours too. So this is a time to get lots of extra support for whatever you need support in. And that live stream mentoring, those office hours, are extended to my students even after they finish their class time with me, even after they have finished their certification process. I've got some students that keep coming back, and they certified years ago. They may not come back every time, but that's okay. They come back when they need to come back. The textbook is over 200 pages. It's digital, downloadable. And we also have what we call the cheat sheet, which is sort of 45 pages of the Cliff's Notes or Cole's Notes for the entire course. Quick reference guide. IPA requires you to do a bunch of case studies as a preparation for the final written exam. And I provide those to you. I provide you with the history and the iris images so that when I mark those for you, we are both looking at the exact same thing. We've got the same information that we're working from. And every cohort of Dynamic Iridology is limited to 10 students, because I think it's really important that class sizes are small so that every student gets all of the attention they need. A lot of people are a little bit shy to ask questions in the first few lessons, but as they get to know their classmates, they feel much more comfortable asking questions. And I like that, because I want my students to ask questions. So why do we need standards for iridology? And that's a really important question. Why would we need standards for iridology? Because IPA has set standards. Now you might think, what do cars have to do with this? Well, we're going to do a comparison here. We're doing an analogy. When you buy a used car that is a certified used car, according to cargurus.ca, it says when a car is sold as certified pre-owned, the selling dealer follows a set of rules, usually set out by an automaker at the corporate level, to ensure that the vehicle meets a standard the brand is willing to back. As a result, the certified pre-owned vehicles tend to be more expensive than their non-certified counterparts, while also typically coming with an automaker-supported warranty, a period of free roadside assistance, and other perks. These additional assurances can provide some peace of mind and add up to significant value relative to a typical used vehicle. So again, what does that have to do with iridology? Well, it has to do with this. IPA has set some standards. As you know, there is no government recognized board for iridology. But IPA has set some standards here. And these standards are quite rigorous. You'll see people out there practicing iridology who've had a 10-hour course, a weekend workshop, calling themselves iridologists. But they don't have the depth of training that IPA feels one should have when one is working with somebody's health. This is important stuff, right? You don't want to mess it up. And so the International Iridology Practitioners Association is the leading accrediting body for iridology in the world. Its mission is to increase and communicate knowledge concerning the art and science of iridology while promoting excellent international standards. And so those standards, again, hold a lot of water with when you explain to your clients the amount of training you've had and the amount of mentoring you've had to get to where you are. Clients appreciate that kind of thoroughness in the people that are working with them. We're going to do a quick recap, but I want to know, if we were to do a lymphatic eye or a biliary eye or a hematogenic eye for our case study today, which one would you want to do? Would you want to do, we'll call them 1, 2, and 3. Would you want to do 1, 2, or 3? 3 and 2? Okay. Well, we'll sit on that for a minute and we'll see where the vote falls. That's hard when it's a tie like that and I get to be the tiebreaker. So just a reminder that there is so much support for you in the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System program. So we've got the 20 live webinar classes, which are recorded for playback on demand, so you can review them as you need to. Live group mentoring twice each month for students and grads. We have the private student and alumni community as a community that's online. So again, it's kind of like a private Facebook group, but it's not on Facebook. It's where they aren't going to censor what we say. Your textbook and your cheat sheets and the mentoring for certification. Now that's important because many teachers, many IPA certified instructors charge extra to mentor their students for certification. I include it in your tuition. 10 student maximum. I know there are teachers out there that teach online cohorts of upwards of 40 and 50 students at a time. And they don't, I have a prerequisite, and that is that you have to have an anatomy and physiology course under your belt before you come into me, because I'm not just teaching markings, I'm teaching integration. And if you don't know how the body works, you're not going to get to go very deep with us. And from the beginning of your time with me until the end of your certification, plus a few months, you will have up to 6 invitations to have one-on-one meetings with me, where we can talk about anything you want to talk about. Struggles you're having, more support that you're needing. Maybe there's concepts that you're not understanding and you're embarrassed to ask about it in front of other students because you think they're getting it all perfect. You know, these are private sessions where we can make sure that you are getting what you need and that you are thriving in this program. So the upcoming course is starting on Wednesday, June 3rd, 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So I don't know what time zones you are in, but I actually had a student once from France, and the class was at 1 a.m. her time. She got up at 1 a.m. for 20 weeks to come to class. I'll tell you, I was impressed. And I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying, that she was really, really dedicated. And that was very impressive. Very impressive indeed. And this is a little video. I don't know if this will play. Let me see if I can get it to play. There's no audio on this. You don't have to take my word for it that the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System is a course worth enrolling in. These are testimonials that my students have posted on the IPA website. And what I love about these is they are all talking about how much they've grown through taking the class and how it's enhanced the work that they're doing, how it's making their work simpler and faster and deeper. So, if that is something that appeals to you, then maybe this is the course for you. And you can feel free to go to iridologyassn.org, the IPA website, and read through those to see what people have said. And that's just a handful of students who are not too shy to post something online. Tuition, there's two choices. Tuition can be paid in full, 4,500 Canadian. Now, are either of you in the US? Or are you both in Canada? You're in the US? Okay. So your credit card, if you've ever purchased anything Canadian, which you might have done through Rob's course, your credit card will take care of converting things. And so your dollar's much stronger than ours. So your credit card is going to say it's going to charge you about 3,300 US when it does the conversion. These are approximate because I don't control the money markets. Or there's the payment plan of 5 monthly payments of 949 Canadian or roughly 700 US. You've got the two choices and you get, regardless of which one you choose, you get everything we've already talked about, all of the support, all of the learning materials, and there's so many other downloadable things in your student site, articles and things that are beneficial. The only way to enroll is to have a one-on-one meeting with me. And the purpose of that meeting is not so that I can twist your arm and guilt you into enrolling. It is so that we can talk about your goals, talk about your background, talk about what you want to do with iridology to see if this is a good fit for you. If it's a good fit, I will invite you to enroll. If it's really not a good fit, then I won't encourage you to enroll, right? And it's not that I'm being a gatekeeper. I want to be protective of you, whether you're my student or not. I want to make sure that you are in the right place for the right information. Does that make sense? And that's why there's not a public registration page, because I don't want people to enroll who are really not ready for it, right? You've got a foundation in iridology. If you want to take it deeper and get a lot more personal mentoring, then this is probably a really good opportunity for you. I'm imagining in the work you've already done an anatomy and physiology class. And so if you've got that, then you are pre-qualified. And so hopefully you grabbed either the QR code or the URL there so that we can have a chat later on. Okay. So we have a choice of 3, and I think we will do all 3. If you're good with staying with me for probably about 40 minutes, I think we'll do all 3. Is that okay with you? Thumbs up, and a big smile. Love that. Love that. Okay. When we do constitutional iridology, we do not need to look at every single marking because every marking is not important to our client at this point in time. We want to cherry pick those markings, and we want to just choose the markings that are going to give us the information we need. Some of what I'm going to share with you here is going to be things you're very familiar with. Maybe some of it is not, okay? Because we're going to talk a lot about triangulation here. So we always look for the primary constitution, then we look for the constitutional subtype, and we look for the structural subtype. That is always the first 3 things we do. And then we are looking for specific markings that give us information. We need to have the context of what does the client want help with. We can't just dive into this and say, this is everything I see, because that's out of context. These are the eyes of a male client who had been to see me a few times 6 years prior to taking these photos. Then, of course, he starts coming back because he's got some new health problems. Surprise, surprise. 5 feet 11 inches tall, weighs 175 pounds. At the time of these photos, he is 64 years old. And he's coming in to see me because he is a little bit concerned. He's been to the doctor. The doctor's run some labs, and the doctor doesn't like the lab results. Hemoglobin A1C is 7.2. Anyone know what you want the hemoglobin A1C below? Okay, so if you're not familiar with that, I strongly recommend that you get yourself a book like this, A Manual of Laboratory and Diagnostic Tests. Because when your clients bring lab tests in, they want you to know what those lab tests mean. Okay, and you need to have that information at hand. They don't mind if you look it up in front of them. They want to know, though, that you're not going to steer them wrong. His glomerular filtration rate was 61. Do you know what the GFR is, what that is measuring?
It's measuring the filtration rate.
Yeah, it's the kidney filtration rate, right. And 61, he is kissing the edge of stage 2 kidney disease. Because at 60, they start calling it stage 2 kidney disease, right? His potassium was slightly low. Now, he was on some medications by this point in time. And his sugars, so separate from his hemoglobin A1C, his blood sugars were coming out anywhere between 6.8 and 7.5, which is too high, right? And so the doctor had put him on metformin, which gave him diarrhea. So they switched him to Glumetza. So now we're starting to play the drug game. And Jardiance, and he was also on hydrochlorothiazide, which is a diuretic, to try to bring his blood pressure down because his blood pressure was elevated. He was on Trandolapril for his elevated cholesterol. Elevated cholesterol often goes hand in hand with elevated triglycerides and with the hemoglobin A1C, right? Really common triad there. And because of the blood pressure meds, he was also on sildenafil, which is Viagra. So medications to chase symptoms, to chase symptoms, to chase symptoms. He was also on Mylan torvastatin, which was another one for cholesterol. So he's on 2 cholesterol meds. I noted when we were working together that he was doing a lot of clearing his throat constantly. He didn't even know he was doing it. Okay. Now that was to me an important marker here as well. His diet, we need to know what his diet was because how did his numbers get so whacked out, right? Breakfast was a cinnamon bun or a muffin or Cheerios. Have you ever looked at the ingredients on Cheerios? They are really awful. Like, do not feed those to anyone, especially not a teething baby. Like, bad news. Lunch was a sandwich, usually on white bread, lunch meat or tuna or egg salad. So, there's something good in there. It's not the white bread, but there might be something good in there. His wife is a flight attendant. So when she's at work, she's gone for 4 days at a stretch. So he's a bachelor for 4 days. So what does he do? He does fast food. Or in the summertime, he'll grill himself a great big steak and throw a potato with that, and that'll be supper. To his credit, he was drinking 3 liters of water a day. It's probably the only really good thing he was doing. Let's come to his eyes now. Now, you know that he's lymphatic. So you know that means he's predisposed to being over acid. You can see that subtype by color, depending on your computer monitor, and every monitor shows color differently. You may or may not see a bit of sort of a yellowish gray to some of the fibers up here, where it doesn't look bright white. There's a slight off-white tinge to it. You can't see my cursor. Can you see my cursor here? Okay, so we're looking above the midline on both eyes between the collarette and the limbus. So everything in zones, do you know your zones? Zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So everything in zones 3 through 7. So everything outside the collarette is a little bit not quite what we want it to be. There we go. Now we've got a cursor right up in here. Okay. So that tells us he is a uric acid predisposition, right? He's a uric acid subtype. His structure, he's not quite anxiety tetanic. I would give him more of a neurogenic rating. with an anxiety tetanic undercurrent. All right. Look at his eyes. Look at the stomach ring. Right? We've got several indicators here that say he doesn't digest protein very well. And that's going to add to that predisposition of uric acid. It's not going to make this look worse in his eyes. It's just going to make it be worse in his body. Because if he's not breaking down his proteins very well, that's going to lead to build up acid, right? His colorette is atonic. So that begs the question, what are his bowel movements doing? What is his nervous system like? He's a really nice, easygoing guy, really nice. And he's got a very high stress job. And so he's learned how to balance the stress with keeping calm. And remember that if his intestinal tract is sluggish because of the atonic tone, that is going to filter back and put stress on the kidneys and the liver as well. Right? Does that make sense? Because if the bowel is sluggish, we're going to get a lot of toxins reabsorbed into the bloodstream and into the lymph, and the liver's going to have to deal with that, and so are the kidneys, right? We've got some contraction furrows, so he is a little bit predisposed to internalizing his stress. We have a little teeny tiny pigment, and I don't know if I can see it on this tiny computer screen. I can't. Oh my goodness, I like using my big computer screen so much better. Let me see if I can find it on his other eye. There it is. Okay. If I'm hoping you can see my cursor, there's a tiny pigment right here. So if you're looking at his left eye, 25 minutes, zone 5. Okay, that little pigment is teaching us that he may be predisposed to the he may have the MTHFR anomaly, which may mean that he needs methylated B vitamins to keep his nervous system balanced and his liver functioning well. He has a tiny bit of a corneal arcus. So we've got that beginning of thickening in here, and that will build over time because it's in the cornea, not in the iris, which suggests that we've got that liver out of balance, has been for some time. The liver's not managing the carbs properly, and that's leading to the triglyceride, elevated hemoglobin A1C, all of the cholesterol issues as well. Okay, so with all of that, of course, to get all that diet information, I had to ask him what his diet was. I had to ask him what his lifestyle was. He is a security manager for an international office, very high profile, high risk international office here in Calgary. And so 1 week of the month, he's in front of the computer screens watching all the security cameras. Not 1 week, alternating weeks. 1 week cameras, 1 week walking the perimeter. So there's every other week he is sedentary because he's watching the computers, right? And it's high stress. He screws up, important people die, right? Kind of thing. So it is very high stress. And he teaches the high tech security things in courses as well. So I knew that I had to make recommendations that he would implement even when his wife was out of town. That's a trick. That's a trick. So we suggested that he get a protein and vegetables for breakfast. He likes to cook. So I said, I want you to batch prep the vegetables, chop up a whole bunch of vegetables and do them, just saute them at breakfast time. And just when they're almost done, put 2 or 3 eggs in beside that. And there's your protein and your veggies for breakfast. He loved that. He really liked that, and throw in some onions, some peppers, some garlic, things to make it very savory. I suggested that he could snack on an apple with some good clean nut butter for his mid-morning snack. He thought that was quite portable, quite doable. Lunch, I suggested doing a large salad, and I just said, go to the grocery store and buy the pre-made salads. I know you're not going to chop everything on your own, but just buy the pre-made salad. Add things to it if you want. Yeah, add tomatoes and peppers and cucumber and celery and whatever, nuts and whatever, fruit, whatever. But start with the base already done. That'll make it more approachable. But make sure you put some real protein with that again. So if you had steak the night before, cook a little extra and have that with your salad. If you had chicken the night before, cook a little extra, have that with your salad. Supper, again, I said protein and veggies. Could he throw stew ingredients into the crock pot or the slow cooker and come home to supper ready made? That would keep him from ordering in pizza, right? And as we suggested these things, he got into it. He was really good with the foods. Now, again, we had coached these things 6 years previously. This wasn't the first time he'd heard them. He just hadn't been doing them. So then we talked about portion control because his portions were typically a little too large. Also suggested that he needed to chew his food. Now, because he had a history of using supplements off and on, I knew I could go there with him in the first appointment. So I added L-arginine as a vasodilator. That's your nitric oxide producer to help with the blood pressure. We used some berberine IR to help with the insulin resistance. And I said that even when he's not, when he's on the computers at work, on the monitors, he needs to be getting 2 30-minute walks a day. So if that means getting out for a walk before work and after work, or if it means, standing up and marching on the spot while he's watching computers, whatever, he needed to be getting off his behind those weeks. Follow-up number 2. He was doing so good, so good. We had really pumped up his protein intake, and we can see in his eyes that protein digestion is not his strong suit. So at this point, we added some betaine hydrochloric acid, and I also added just a general enzyme to help him with his carbs and his fats as well. He reported that already his blood pressure had not been well regulated with the BP meds, but with the dietary work and the supplements we were doing, his blood pressure with the meds and the supplements and the foods and the walking was coming down. It was down to 118/74, which is lovely. It's in the ballpark. Now we can work on getting the meds gone. Now, I can't coach him on that, but his doctor could. His hemoglobin A1C came down very quickly too. It came down to 5.9. Now, 5.9 is the top that we want it. We actually want it lower than that, but at 5.9, we're making good progress. A month later, I saw him again. This time I suggested he needed to do some resistance training. I said, can you take some stretchy bands into that monitor room and do stretchy band workouts while you're watching monitors? He said he absolutely could. So that was good. We could get him doing some resistance work. Over the course of the 2 years from when we started working together for the second go round, his doctor has taken him off the Giardians and the Glumetza because his blood sugars are really in line. His triglycerides are almost back down to where we need them to be. And his blood pressure medications have all been reduced. And his cholesterol meds have been reduced as well. So he's getting there. But it was by looking at his eyes that we knew that we needed to support his protein digestion, support his liver in various ways, and what kinds of foods to recommend. Make sense? Anything there that was new for you? The book about lab testing, excellent, excellent. Good job, good job. Okay. And I think we need to, as holistic health practitioners, we need to have resources at our fingertips that help us bridge between medicine and holistic for our clients, right? We can't just be polarized in our own corner. All right, biliary. These eyes, now biliary means, and you might look at those and go, but those are brown. They are biliary. When we have biliary, it means that we see no blue, but we do see some fibers. And when we look closely in this eye, we've got some fibers very obvious right down here. So between about 27 minutes and about 31 minutes in this right iris, we've got fibers, but a little bit more of a fiber sensation at about 42 minutes, right? So we've got these fibers even in the left eye. We've got some fibers down at about the 35-minute mark. So this is a biliary eye. So we know there's things from the lymphatic and things from the hematogenic in this person. This person has both sets of traits. Just how they're balanced is the important thing. This client has been with me just about since the beginning of my practice. She was with me back in my Jensen days, and she is still with me today. She's coming in this weekend. So she's been with me for, last time she was in, we calculated which babies we were having at the time that we met, because she was having kids and so was I. And seriously, it's been like 42, 43 years that she's been a client of mine. Clients tend to fade in and out over time. And so they'll often come in for 3 or 4 appointments and then they're feeling good, so they disappear for a while. Sometimes they disappear for too long and things start to fall apart. And then when they fall apart, if you've done good work, they come back for a few more appointments and you get them back on track. And it's just an ebb and a flow. It's just a natural thing. She has a lot of training in herbs and nutrition, and she knows a lot. Like most of us, we know more than we apply, and she just needs someone to lovingly nudge her in the right direction. So when she came back to see me again, it was about 5 years ago. These are from then. She had gained a bunch of weight. She wanted to lose the weight. Her blood pressure was up. Her cholesterol and triglycerides were up. Her hemoglobin A1C was up. And again, the doctor wanted to medicate everything. She didn't want to. My client didn't want to do that. She knew we could do this without meds. She just needed someone to help her sort it out and put it in a priority sequence, which I love doing that. So as we look at her eyes, we can see that she's definitely biliary, ferrum chromatose, right? Anxiety tetanic, and lipemic diathesis. And she has a circulatory ring. Hopefully all of those make sense for you. And so we just dove in really deep when she started coming back in again, because it had been like a 5-year gap since the time before when she'd been working with me. So I knew what her goals were, and they were lofty goals, again, just like the first client we worked with today. Constitutionally, being biliary, we know we've got liver that needs to have some support. We know pancreas needs some support. And so we needed to also then support her digestion and her nervous system because of what we see in her eyes. So in her first appointment, gathered more information. I knew her husband had been ill. He has 2 very rare but typically non-fatal forms of cancer. And during COVID, he'd had a stem cell transplant done. He is a narcissist, and so she's been caregiving him, and it's all about him, and she is burning out. Her children are no support. Her children are all married, and they're all off doing their own things. They don't help out at all. And so she had really not cared for herself for quite a few years, and it was showing. So we talked about diet. Diet was basically whatever her husband wanted her to cook. And so we talked about how could she do it where she was cooking things that he would eat, but that she could eat healthfully as well. And if he wanted something that was not as good, well, she makes a bit of that on the side, but then she makes extra things just for her. So maybe they're having their protein the same, but she wants 2 or 3 different kinds of vegetables with that, and he wants white rice. Right? So it's easy enough to kind of work things out without having to create 2 entirely different meals. And then I did say, he's well enough to go fishing. He's probably well enough to cook his own supper. And she went, oh, yeah, maybe. I said, you maybe need to kind of suggest that if he's well enough to go fishing, he can cook supper that night, kind of thing. So we suggested with this client to reduce her carb intake. It had gotten really high, and to increase her protein, and to get more and better fat choices in her diet. And we went through step by step. What could that look like for breakfast? What could that look like for lunch? What could that look like for supper? And she knows all the answers. So when I'm asking her, what would you like to do for breakfast proteins? She knows right now 2 or 3 ideas. Great. And what will you put with that? And she was coming up with 2 or 3 ideas. So I was getting her to process the information because I know she had it. She just needed to be guided through it. I encouraged her to get active. She had stopped moving, literally stopped moving. Her whole body was just going to freeze anytime now. So I suggested getting out to walk for 30 minutes a day. They've got the cutest little dog. I said, your dog wants you to take him for a walk. She said, yes, he does. So she started walking for 30 minutes every day. We put her on omega-3, Really good for emulsifying triglycerides and cholesterols. We got her on some Bearburn IR, again, to work on that insulin resistance. We worked on her gut biome. We worked with really encouraging her to get a broad variety of foods to feed the biome, and we fed her some probiotics. We did the betaine hydrochloric acid with her because we are increasing her protein intake. She's got a bit of uric acid tendency in her eyes as well. We also did just a broad digestive enzyme and got her to put protein in at breakfast. That was a huge leap for her. She did so good, so good. She lost 20 pounds in 3 months without dieting. Just through diet correction and walking, she lost 20 pounds. And 3 months, that same 3 months, all of her numbers came into the normal range. She did such a good job. About a year later, they had some significant family stress with one of their grandsons, and it just threw this client totally off the rails, totally off the rails. And about 6 months later, she had a heart attack. Now, I personally believe, from the people that I know who've had heart attacks, that there's always an emotional trigger for a heart attack. It's not just a cholesterol blockage in an arterial vein or in a heart, sorry, in a coronary artery, right? And this, for her, it was this issue with this grandson. Fortunately, her husband had worked in heavy industry for a while, and he recognized that she was probably having a heart attack. They live about 5 minutes from a major hospital, and he knew if he called for the ambulance, it would be 30 minutes to get to them. So he packed her up in the car, took her straight to the hospital, and she got treatment immediately. Now we are working with the challenge that when you've had a heart attack, the doctors feel like they own you, and they put the fear of everything into you. So they have her on 9 medications. You know, blood pressure, cholesterol, triglycerides, insulin resistance. They've got all of them going. So, and she is very nervous, even though she knows a lot, she's very nervous about adding supplements on top of her meds. Fortunately, with my training, I have access to an app where I can load in all of her meds and see what deficiencies they can create. And then I can load in the supplements I want to use, and it'll tell me if there are any contraindications. Now, the other thing you really, really need on your desk, let me find mine, is a really good medical drug reference book. The new one of these has just come out for 2026. And they only come out about every 3 or 4 years. So I'm not that far behind, because the one that's just come out is the one after this one. This one has contraindications with medications and herbs in it, or vitamins and herbs and foods even, right? So you can look them up in here and see if there are going to be any issues that are not great. So what we've really done with her is we have worked with food, and I've encouraged her to, again, get back to the eating patterns we had established when she did so well. That's going to be a huge part of her program, right? Getting back onto the right foods, getting 30 minutes of walking every day. I don't care if it's fast or slow. Depending on the condition her heart's in, it might have to be a gentle saunter, but I'll take what I can get here. And what I've also been encouraging her to do is work with herbs in a culinary fashion. So rather than taking herbal supplements where it's quite concentrated, just, use a little more cayenne in your chili, or put a little more parsley in your couscous, or, just add a little more culinary herbs into what you're doing every day to do 2 things: to feed your gut flora and to build the nutrient level in your body. Right? So we kept it really, really simple. I'm excited to be seeing her again. She's been away for about a year again, and so it's going to be really great to see her this weekend and see where she's at and how I can best support her. Anything new there for you? Refresher. Good job. Good job. Okay. Hematogenic. How many of you feel that hematogenic is the hardest eye to assess? Debbie does? Okay. A lot of people do. A lot of people do. I personally don't find it challenging at all. Sometimes the pigment is very dense and you don't see the fiber structure. That's when you sometimes need to lean a little more on what you see on that inner pupillary border in the nutritive zone and at the periphery and into the sclera, right? So here we have a hematogenic iris. Now, old iridology would have said that these mean this person has parasites. We now know that is not true at all. These do show areas where the body might want to hold parasites, but it's not a guarantee of that. So we need to walk away from that if that's an old belief that might be lingering for you. This is a client, female, obviously a client, female, mid-30s, Asian. She and her husband came to me because they'd been trying for 3 years to have a baby. And they had already been to the fertility clinic. The fertility clinic had only given them metformin and Clomid, and they'd had no results with that. They wanted to know, they'd heard about me from friends whom I'd helped with some fertility challenges. And so they came in wanting to see if I had anything that would be helpful. So as we started talking, I wanted to know how frequently was she having a cycle. Her cycles were 90 days apart. There's no way on the face of the planet a 90-day cycle will ever be fertile. Okay, the hormones are just not what they need to be. And at the time, I didn't know that she had been diagnosed with PCOS and type 2 diabetes. But the fact that her cycles were 90 days apart, I had to ask, have they ever said or suggested you might have PCOS? Oh, yes, they have. Well, then have they ever suggested that you might be insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic? Okay, now we're cooking with gas. So as I'm looking at her eyes, she's definitely anxiety tetanic. So we know she probably has internalizes her stress. And she has just enough tiny little brown flecks of pigment in her eyes. And there's just one right up there specifically that caught my attention, tiny little thing that made me think she's probably MTHFR and PCOS, which they are now calling, oh, I should know this, I just read it the other day, polyendocrine ovarian syndrome. It's they changed the name of it so that it's not just about ovaries. It's about the whole endocrine system now. But seeing that one little fleck of pigment out of place made me think, I bet she's what we used to call PCOS. And so then I needed to ask her about her diet. Well, she and her husband are first-generation immigrants from Asia. White rice at every meal. Sticky sweet sauces on everything. Breakfast was a sweet roll and a fruit drink, not even a real juice. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, did the fertility clinic talk to you at all about nutrition and diet? Nope, they just gave me metformin. Doesn't it just make you want to scream? And so, okay, so now we know what we're working with. We have got to be working with her diet first and foremost. So we cleaned up her diet, got her having protein 3 meals a day, got her giving up the white rice. Now, this was huge. I mean, this couple, they're Asian, having them give up white rice is like telling them to, I don't know, sacrifice their firstborn male child kind of thing. It's serious business. And as we're talking about diet, she also had a yeast infection at the time when she first came. Her face got longer and longer. And it was that deer in the headlights that I can't possibly do this. And her dear sweet husband came to every appointment with her, not because he's controlling, but because he truly felt this was a team effort. And he reached over and he took her hand and he said, don't worry, sweetheart. I will take over all of the food prep and the cooking if you'll just eat what I make for you. And I looked at him and I looked at her. I said, you do know that he is a keeper, right? Because he's willing to do that for you and for a baby. Absolutely. And he kept his word. If there was a question about nutrition, he would send me the email and saying, can we do this? I'd go yes or no, and we'd make sure he was on the straight and narrow. We cleaned up her diet tremendously. We used a prenatal vitamin that had the methylated Bs in it. And we worked on her liver. We did some liver enzyme work with her as well. And did we ever work hard? It took us about 6 months, and we took those cycles from 90 days down to 35. 35 is a fertile cycle. We had her charting her temperatures. We knew when she was ovulating. We knew she had the progesterone based on her temperatures. Things were good. And, but what we did notice as well, and you would notice this as well, if you look on an iridology map, she has a radial furrow coming right down through the ovary in both eyes. And I can only show you on one eye. She's got this one here for ovary. And the way my screen is set up now, if I try to show you the other one. So 25 minutes in her left eye is the other one. So we know that radial furrows talk about interruptions in the nerve feed to organs. And so she had this nerve feed interruption to both ovaries. That's going to compound the issue. And so as we're working together and we're tinkering every month, we met every month. They never missed an appointment, watched her temperature charts, tinkered with the supplements, tinkered with the diet. And finally, we'd been working together for 18 months and she wasn't pregnant yet. And I'm laying in bed thinking, how am I going to tell them I've done everything I know to do? And I did extra research. I call them the 2 a.m. questions. Ideas would come into my mind. I'd write it down and I'd come down to my office the next morning and do the research to see how it correlated. And so here we are, 18 months, having our 18th appointment. We've seen tremendous improvement in all of her labs. We've seen her cycles be beautiful. And I am just so sad thinking that we're going to say, I'm sorry, I've done everything I can. And they say, we need to talk to you. And I'm going, oh, great. They're going to fire me. They're going to fire me. Great. And it's like, okay, but I deserve it. We didn't get the results we wanted. And they said, we did a pregnancy test this morning. We're pregnant. And we watched that pregnancy like a hawk. She was told she would develop gestational diabetes, and she did not. We continued appointments every month for the entire pregnancy. And then for about 6 months after, through the initial breastfeeding and, getting everything started well. Healthy baby boy. Tiny little petite Asian woman, delivered that baby from first contraction to baby in arms in 4 hours. It was like, holy doodle, that's greased lightning. And so, but mom and baby, very healthy, very happy. And on the testimonials from clients, you'll recognize theirs. If you look up, if you Google Cobblestone Health testimonials, you will find them. You'll know who it is because her husband told the whole story right there, right? And so looking at her eyes, I would not have known MTHFR if I hadn't seen that pigment. I wouldn't have understood the importance of the methylated Bs if I hadn't seen that pigment, right? I looked at pupil flattenings, and that also gave me more information about different organs that inherently would need support. And we just put it all together. She internalized her stress. We talked a lot about how to reduce stress because she was a corporate accountant. And, we just talked a lot about lifestyle things. And I wouldn't have known to do those things if I hadn't looked at her eyes. The eyes gave me all of the inside information to ask all the right questions to get us to where they have a beautiful baby boy. Yeah, right. We celebrated. When I know I've got a client who is imminently due, I leave my phone turned on 24/7 and keep it by my bed, right? Because if there's an issue and they want my help, I want to be there for them. So we were in church and my phone rang. I don't usually leave a church meeting for anything. I respectfully stay. when I saw it was her, I was out of that meeting so fast to give her the support she needed. I was just so happy that things were going well for her. And they did. They went very well. They were mostly calling to say, did I think they should call the midwife? And I'm listening to her in the background going, yeah, like a half an hour ago, maybe. Yeah, you need to get her called right away, please. I'll stay on the line with you as long as you want, but you need to call your midwife now. All righty. So again, the next course is coming up starting on June 3rd. So if you are feeling like you would like support in deepening your skills, you might have the identification skills down, but the triangulation of putting the markings together, what questions to ask, how to create protocols, then maybe the course is a good fit for you, right? To deepen your skills and to give you the confidence so that you can start using what you've learned. If you've already done a course and you're not using it yet, maybe you just need more support to get to where you can use it. So I would invite you to, again, either grab the URL or grab the QR code and set a time for us to chat. Let's just see if this really would be a good thing for you. And if it would, I'm happy to invite you in. And if it wouldn't, I'm really happy to send you in another direction, a direction that might be more appropriate.
Yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I am interested in your course, but I need to take the anatomy course first.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a heads up. I will be teaching again in September. And after that, there are no courses scheduled because I'm going into semi-retirement and I don't know how much I'm teaching after that. So, but I will still be supporting my students. That's a non-negotiable for me. Do you have an anatomy and physiology course already in mind?
I have one in mind, yes.
Okay. I'm happy to give you another option if you would like something to compare to.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
You bet. I can send that to you, Jenny. IPA is particular that your A&P and IPA, they're particular in that it has to have at least 60 instructional hours and you have to get a grade of 80% or a B or higher. That's a prerequisite to sit for their certification exam. And it's a prerequisite for me to bring you into dynamic iridology, because when you know the organs and how they work together, it makes it so much easier for us to go into deep dives with the iridology. Debbie, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
I think that was really helpful. It was nice to have a refresher. And I think I'm going to review the material on your website and then reach out.
Lovely. And I do hope to speak with you soon. Excellent. Well, thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a lovely evening and we will talk to you soon.